There's a few here. Anybody else need? I have one passing around. We're going to be learning some more of the laws of Chanukah. If we spoke about where to light the Chanukah candles. The first rule being, of course, nowhere dangerous. Don't want to get into trouble with that. And let's talk about who lights the candles and the mitzvah and how we light the candles. So Chanukah candles, that's chapter 12. We're going to look at chapter 12 now. Pnei Halacha, Zmanim. Chapter 12, lighting the Chanukah candles.
Someone get us a page number?
241. 241. Shalom
Thank
Noam.
you.
Nice to see you. And Shalom Aleichem. Russell, behind Russell is, hi.
Hi, I'm Mitzvah. I'm trying out the day.
Welcome, Yitzhak. Where are you from?
In England as well.
I've heard of it. What part of England? What part of England, Yitzhak? Manchester.
Ah.
Lovely.
Just like on her own.
Okay. Home of Messi.
Really? He was born in Manchester? Messi? Yeah.
No, now he plays for Manchester United.
He does?
Plays for PSG. Same thing.
Messi.
I don't know, the whole situation is really messy.
PSG is run by these oil Arabs and they.
I think you're thinking of Ronaldo.
Yeah, you're thinking of Ronaldo.
No, you're thinking of Ronaldo. Maybe.
Okay.
Okay, I got it mixed up.
Ronaldo is at United.
That's what I just said.
So Messi.
Ronaldo's at United.
Uh,
I'm sorry.
Torah.
I was wrong. Yes. Okay. Lighting the Chanukah candles. The mitzvah to light Chanukah candles. Sages ordained lighting candles all 8 days of Chanukah, which correspond to the days in which the Jewish people celebrate and praise God for helping them defeat the Greeks, liberate Jerusalem, and purify the holy temple. Page 241. It was on these days that the oil in the temple's menorah burnt miraculously. Even though lighting Chanukah candles is a rabbinic mitzvah, we recite a bracha over it. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shekidshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Some people don't say the word shell, but in any case, one could cynically ask, how can we say that God commanded us, page 242 at the top, God commanded us when the written Torah does not contain such a commandment? Who asked that question? Where is that question asked? Gemara in Shabbat 23a, 1 second. The answer is given there that the Torah gives the sages the authority to institute mitzvot within the guidelines of the Torah. As it says, you shall act in accordance with the instructions. Asita kechol haTorah. The word Torah is used for instruction. So you could say that it's from the Torah that the rabbis have the right to institute mitzvot. That you've given you the ruling they had handed down to you, you must not deviate from the verdict that they tell you, that to the right, to the left, Varim 17:11. It also says, remember the days of old, consider the years of ages past. Ask your father, he will inform you, your elders, and they will tell you. So we see that the rabbis have the authority to create mitzvot. Unbelievable. According to this explanation, it sounds like the rabbis who create a mitzvah like Chanukah, when you light the Chanukah candles, are you fulfilling a rabbinic commandment?
Yes.
Yeah, according to this, it sounds like you're fulfilling a biblical commandment. Biblical commandment to listen to the rabbis. The rabbi said, light Chanukah candles.
Well, then
So
you're
if
saying
A equals B and B
that-
equals C, so then A equals C.
If you're saying that this is a biblical commandment to fulfill the rabbis, you're saying every single rabbinical commandment is.
Precisely.
Yes.
Precisely. Excellent. This is a big quandary, and the Rambam discusses at length. It's not a class on how to understand the oral law and how to understand rabbinic mitzvot, but ultimately, what this Gemara presents about this issue of the Chanukah, how could the rabbi, how can we say every day, we're going to say 8 days in a row, blessed are you, God, who commanded us to light the Chanukah candles. Did God command us to light Chanukah candles? The answer is yes. He commanded us to listen to the rabbis. And the rabbi said, light Chanukah
How
candles.
high of a rabbi do you need to be able to?
It's a good question. Could be that do we today have the authority to create new mitzvahs? We all know the answer is no. But the rabbis in the times of Second Temple, who created this mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candles, they did have the power. Maybe there was a Sanhedrin, maybe they had special, maybe they had a chain of ordination which lasted from Moshe Rabbeinu. For whatever reason, the rabbis, which we usually call the sages, they have this authority. And of course, it's complicated because if you say that every rabbinic mitzvah is a biblical mitzvah, so then there's no rabbinic mitzvahs. We know that there are differences. Sorry?
By that logic, how do you explain Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim?
You could say it's a mitzvah from the Torah to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut according to that logic, right? Because if you follow those rabbis that say that it's a mitzvah to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, so then it's a biblical mitzvah. Everything, again, that it's a paradox. You can't say that.
Though it's not the.
Oh, that's right. You could say there's no Sanhedrin, right? That's right. But it's a paradox. Obviously, that has to be answered. It can't be that every rabbinic mitzvah is also a biblical mitzvah, because then there's no rabbinic mitzvahs. But the concept that the Gemara answers, that we say, God, you commanded us to light the Chanukah candles, there must be some element of truth into that.
Even when we us to learn the Megillah, and yet we say that.
Exactly, same thing, very similar. Other rabbinic mitzvahs, there's 7 famous rabbinic mitzvahs, actually hundreds, but there's actually 7 famous in a list of those 7 mitzvot, positive commandments the rabbi said you must do. Reading the Megillah on Purim, lighting the candles on Chanukah. What else? Other 5?
What about the other Megillah?
No, there's no obligation. Netilat Yadayim, excellent. Reciting the Hallel, good. We're up to 4 out of 7. We already got the majority of them. Another one is Eruv, many people say. Eruv, making an Eruv around town, or the concept of Tchumen.
Mikvah?
No, that's in the Torah. That's a pasuk in the Torah. So we're up to 5. What are the last 2? Last 2 mitzvot Rabbanan.
So there was lighting Chanukah candles.
Hanukkah candles, reading Megillah, Netilat Yadayim, Erev Tichumen,
Hallel.
Hallel. So that's
And let's see 5. 2 more.
Can you repeat the question, please?
There's a classic list of 7 rabbinic
Lighting
mitzvahs.
Chanukah
Trying to remember
candles,
them.
Eruv,
Read the Torah?
Hallel, reading Megillah, Netilat Yadayim.
Like it's days that
No,
we
I
read.
don't think
Because
it's.
the Torah session, we need to read every 7 years.
Right. No, I don't think that's a rabbinic.
No.
It's not one of the 7. In any case, I'll remember it.
Is it
Oh,
certain
no.
brachot?
Brachot, making brachot. That's a rabbinic institution. I think that's one of the lists. So it's just one more. Just one more. So what's that?
The ancient Knesset, they make the brachot, right?
Anshe Knesset Agdolah, correct?
So it's not the rabbi. Rabbi from
Well,
Doctor.
good. We learned this morning, right. We call them rabbis. We call them the sages. Okay. The last one. So we have to think about what the last one. Oh, I know. Lighting Shabbat candles.
So it's
Lighting Shabbat candles.
I have a question. If rabbinic is the adjective conjugation of rabbi, what is the adjective conjugation of sages? Sagiatic or?
Don't know. Ask your English teacher. Okay, there are people who are waiting for questions. Malti and Reuven. I answered it already? Oftentimes I find that happens, that if I make you wait a little bit and let me talk for more than 30 seconds, sometimes they just completing the thought will answer the questions. I appreciate your questions.
You go like that and then you keep talking.
That's why, because usually that's what happens. So sometimes I do take the prerogative of waiting, not taking a question immediately, although I love questions. But sometimes just let me talk for another sentence.
And quit, same thing.
Same thing, it happens. Oh, okay, very good. Okay, good. So this is a wonderful, wonderful little question and answer of the Gemara. As I said, it bears much further investigation. Exactly the relationship between the Torah commandment and the rabbinic commandment. But essentially, this is a classic, one of the 7 classic rabbinic mitzvahs.
What do we say the last rabbinic?
Lighting Shabbat candles.
Could it be that these sages were also Nevi'im, and so therefore they were speaking on behalf of, rather than merely ruling on?
Could be. There's different approaches to that. The Rambam is very clear that that is not true. Because the power of the rabbis is independent and different than the power of prophecy, and never the twain shall meet. prophecy is one mode of divine, a channel of divine authority, and rabbinic development without prophecy, through our intellect, through our striving, through our understanding of the Torah, is a second and separate channel. But others are not so clear, like the Rambam is on that. But so that's debatable. But it's a mitzvah derabanan, and it's funny that 2 out of the 7 classic ones are with candles, right? Shabbat candles and Hanukkah candles.
Lights, not candles necessarily.
Lights, correct. That we say
Like
candles.
handle mitzvah.
No. It's a much later custom. But, okay, let's continue. We're on page 242. Thus, in order to remember and publicize the miracle that God performed on our behalf during the Simple Era, the sages instituted a mitzvah to light candles all 8 days of Hanukkah. And Yitzchak, you were right that the sages nowadays who try to institute a holiday to celebrate the independence of creation of the state of Israel are patterning themselves after what the sages did by Chanukah and by Purim, creating a holiday and specific commemorations. And the third part of it is, many times the argument is saying the Hallel. Saying the Hallel, also one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvot. And as I think I mentioned the other day, the headquarters of reciting the Hallel, the discussions are all around Chanukah. So we say full Hallel for 8 days straight. Women are obligated in this mitzvah just as men are, of the Chanukah candles. Fascinating.
Yeah, are there any other time-bound positive mitzvah where they are obligated to?
There are. Even though it is a time-bound positive mitzvah, from which women are usually exempt, they are nonetheless obligated because women were involved in the miracle. Interesting. Any other mitzvot where women are obligated, even though it's time-bound, Shabbat candles is connected to the biblical mitzvah of keeping Shabbat, where there's a positive and a negative. There's a aseh and a lot aseh, shamor v'zachor, and the Talmud derives that women are obligated in all of the laws of Shabbat, both the negative, of course, like all negative mitzvot, and therefore in all the positive commandments as well. So all the mitzvot of Shabbat, women are obligated, even though it's time-bound because it's once a week, right? Still, the idea, women are obligated in that for a different reason, though. Women are obligated in laws of Shabbat, not because it's not similar to this. But you're right, that is an example of a time-bound mitzvah which women are obligated. There's many exceptions. What's one which is very similar to this rationale by Chanukah, because they were involved in the miracle. What does that even mean? How were women involved in the miracle? Is there an extra copy of Zmanim somewhere lying around, not open? Remind me, Alex?
Alex.
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
How were they involved?
How long has it been?
About 7.5 years.
7.5 years. But I think I was teaching here 7.5 years ago. Yeah. It's been 9 or 10 years. Welcome back. Great to have you. Okay, so women were involved in the miracle of the Chanukah story. How? Anybody know?
They're making the donuts.
Read the book of the Maccabees.
Well,
Good book.
Chagit are no Yehudit.
Yehudit, excellent. What happened? Who's Yehudit?
Yehudit fed the general some cheese and wine and made him get drunk and tired and cut off his head.
That's right. That's right. Say again. Someone else?
Just said she was the sister of Matthew.
Sister of Matityahu chopped off the head of the Greek general. Wow.
This was before.
That's why there's a custom. I saw a funny question the other day. There's something called shoot SMS. Do you know what that means? One second. Shoot SMS.
That's in the text message SMS.
Text message SMS. What does shoot mean? Shoot stands, it's a Hebrew acronym for She'elot Utshuvot.
Question and answer.
Question and answer. In other words, in what is it usually in Jewish literature? There's a Jewish literature called Shut, She'elot Utshuvot. In English, they usually call it responsa. Responsa are, it's the plural for responses, for letters of halachic questions which people send to rabbis, and they get back the answers. In the day, it was snail mail. Nowadays there's email, and nowadays there's even people asking questions. I get a couple a day usually. Questions, just short text messages. I have a halacha question. Can you please answer it for me? So they call it shoot, sheilot utshuvot, SMS. So there's a little place where every week they put a few of these quick, short answers. Obviously, they have a different character from the original responsa, which was long, complicated cases of marriages and adultery, and very difficult questions. But by the way, the first discussions of electricity in halacha, first discussions about any of all these modern devices, they're not discussed in the codes. They're brought, the answer, the question was sent to great rabbis, poskim, and they wrote their answers in a teshuvah. The singular of a response is teshuvah, and plural is teshuvot, sheilot teshuvot. That's where all the discussions of interesting halachic questions are. Anyways, in the shoot SMS I saw on Shabbat, someone asked, is it a mitzvah to eat a sufganiyah on Chanukah?
No, but no one's gonna tell you now.
Short answer, it's SMS, it's really short question and answer.
Yes.
The answer was no. I was very happy
Yes.
of the answer. There is no mitzvah to eat
It's a
sufganiyah on Chanukah.
custom because
But-
of the menha, of the.
But he said there is a mitzvah to eat dairy products on Hanukkah. You may never have heard of this, but there is a mitzvah to eat dairy products. Why dairy products? Because Yehudit served salty cheese to this Greek general that made him thirsty, so that he would drink lots of wine. And when he drank lots of wine, got drunk and fell asleep, and she could chop off his head. So
Is that what Yoel did to,
Yael.
Yael did to
Yael.
Sisera?
That's right. Very similar story.
In Shoftim?
Yes.
Fed him salty cheese.
It doesn't say salty cheese over there, but by Yehudit it says. In any case, that's shoot SMS. I'm gonna take some questions. There is no mitzvah to eat sufganiyah. There's no mitzvah either to eat dairy. You don't have to, but there is a Jewish custom, an ancient Jewish custom of eating dairy on Hanukkah. There's no ancient Jewish custom of eating sufganiyah, but there's a modern Jewish custom of eating sufganiyah, and I'm all in favor if they're healthy. Yeah. Thank you for waiting. Hirsch had a question. Hirsch, go ahead.
So, was it permissible for the women who were of the Jewish people to serve in our armies, be generals, be soldiers? Was
question.
permissible?
Right, so it's a good question. There's a lot of stories of how the Maccabees fought, and the women's role. This is how we got to this question, because women are obligated to light the Hanukkah candles. Why? We said because they had a role in the miracle. What role? We got to the story of Yehudi. Okay, so she killed the general. But it sounds like there's actually more. There's more stories about women's role in the Chanukah story. There's a great midrash, also about a sister of Matityahu, the way it goes. And this one is that, you might have heard this midrash, that one of the persecutions of the Jewish people at the time, we spoke, what were the three things that they disallowed? Outlawed?
Shabbat, studying Torah, and bris, exactly.
Right, so the classic three, other than studying Torah, I think I mentioned the other day, Chashmonaim, somebody asked me where did the word come from. I gave you over an explanation that it's an acronym for Chodesh, Shabbat, and Milah. Those are the three things that they outlawed. In any case, there's another persecution that appears in some sources. It says that whenever a Jewish bride was to get married, she would have to go to the governor.
Oh, this one, and had to sleep with him.
Sleep with him
And there
before
was
marriage.
a whole lot of discussion of whether or not they're allowed to be married or stay married still and everything and all. And the
I don't
rabbi
know about
said-
any halachic discussion. Obviously, they were suffering under this persecution.
And that if she doesn't, she'll be killed.
Right, it was under threat of death, for sure. They wouldn't do it otherwise,
So
so.
just start a family without officially getting married.
Or officially get married, just don't
That's
tell
not
them.
allowed.
That's not allowed.
It's not
Even
allowed.
if
We
the
don't allow such
alternative, even if
marriages.
the alternative was sleeping with the governor, it wouldn't be better to just say, look, now we're permanently engaged.
you guys have to learn how to it's like
Set it to 2 votes.
telling somebody a joke. You can't ask questions on, every little piece of the joke, it's like, so when you tell over a midrash about, the legend goes that XYZ happened and then XYZ happened, you can't stop in the middle and say, well, wait a minute, there's this halacha question, wait a minute, there's this halacha question. You gotta listen to the story and try to pick out from the story what the message that you're trying to tell us. There's a lot of questions we can ask on the story, but I haven't even told half the story. Let me tell you some of the story, and then we'll discuss it. And there's many interesting questions, halachic ones, but let's tell the story. 1 second, Moshe, let me just tell the story. Is it about the story? Is it?
No, it's actually about the response. I've had a question for about 5 minutes.
About the response, go ahead, and then I'll tell the
So
story.
I just wanted to say that my anecdote about the Weimar Republic toilet paper question in Germany, I think originally came from a shoot that was happening there.
Good, makes sense. That's
Toilet
usually where questions, halach questions are talked about. Good. Okay, I don't know what the halach question about the toilet paper, but all right.
It was
For
more
another
like,
time.
Can you use like practically useless banknotes as toilet paper? It was a question from
Right,
the inflation era Germany
okay.
on Shabbat, because is it touching money? Because they're still technically legal tender. The answer was yes, it is permissible.
Thank you. Interesting. Yehudit, according to this tradition, maybe that was what happened to her.
She talked about that?
Was that she was getting married, or this maybe it's a different sister, not Yehudit.
She was called Miriam.
Miriam, that's it. Miriam was supposed to wed, and so they made a wedding. And at the wedding, she stood up in the center of the hall. She tore off her wedding dress. Everybody was shocked. The lack of tzniut, immodesty. And they were about to stone her. They were really upset at her. And then she gave them the following speech. How can you, leaders of the Jewish people, right, our brothers, the elders, the rabbis, how can you're upset about this immodesty, but you're allowing us to suffer under this horrible persecution that every bride has to go to the governor on the night of her wedding? We got to do something about it. And because of her inspirational speech, they devised a plan and they started the rebellion. And this was the beginning of the Maccabees' revolt against the oppression, the religious persecution. So this is another story. I think maybe she became a warrior. I don't know. The type of Joan of Arc stories where the women were the warriors. We don't really have those in our Jewish tradition. To answer Hirsch's question,
Fairy tale.
I don't know. Could be. I mean, we know that Yael famously, tricked a governor, the general Sisera, and killed him. And this is a story of Yehudi that actually, took a sword and similarly killed the general. But in terms of actually fighting in the trenches with the men, I think that's an anachronism. I don't think that happened. Maybe unique figures like he famously told of Joan of Arc.
So there were some very few specific cases of Jewish women doing spy-esque acts of murdering the enemy within the war, but they were not, a regular drafted soldier like nowadays in
Correct.
the IDF. It's very
Correct. So some people say that's because of these stories, though, of Yehudit and Miriam. Maybe that's why women were involved in the miracle. There's two opinions. The other opinion says no. What does it mean that they were involved in the miracle? Just that they were suffering from the persecution. They could not keep Chodesh, Shabbat, and Milah. They were not allowed to teach their children Torah. They were not allowed to keep the mitzvot. And so they were suffering under religious persecution, just like their husbands were. And that's what it means. Not that they had any central role as heroines, but this is what the Tosfot says. Rashi says, sure, there was a heroine in the Chanukah story. What's the other exceptional mitzvah, which women are obligated, even though it's a time-bound rabbinic mitzvah? Pesach, correct, although Pesach is biblical. No. Women are obligated in the 4 cups by Pesach, And they say that's because that they were also part of the miracle by Pesach. And the question is, how were the women part of the miracle in Pesach? Well, the simple answer is they were persecuted, they were slaves, just like the men. But where were they? Where do we find the women being heroines in Egypt?
Oh, because they would go out to feed their husbands and to induce them to have.
Right, they didn't give up and stop having children. They wanted they seduced their husbands to sleep with them so that they would have children, despite them being in terrible times with no hope and no future. So their husbands had given up, and they were the ones who kept the hope alive. Similar, the last story, of course, the most famous heroine of Jewish history, Esther. The Purim story, Malti said it, that in the Purim story, of course, the hero of there was Mordechai, but there was Esther. The book is named after her. Okay, so it's definitely, women are obligated to hear the Megillah, even though it's a time-bound mitzvah. Why? Because they were part of the miracle. What does it mean, part of the miracle? Two interpretations. Either that they were under threat of death, in that case, persecution, religious persecution in our case, or that they were actually stories of women being the actual heroines, and being very involved in the miracle in a more intimate way. Yes?
Why are they usually exempt from time-bound positive mitzvah?
It's a good question. It's not really a topic of our discussion today. The usual answer given is to enable them to take care of the children. Children, if you haven't had any yet, I imagine. I don't want to judge, but I imagine. So you just finished high school, so that's all. That's the only reason I'm making assumptions about you. Otherwise, but generally, children taking care of the children is 24/7, and you never know when the child needs something. You can't really have any commitments that are time bound, because they're bound to be broken or to be pushed off. So enable the women to take care of it. That's the standard answer. But bottom line is that's the general rule. But as we see here, there's exceptions. So women have to light the Chanukah candles. They're obligated. However, the parentheses say, see below, note 2, it is customary for a married woman to fulfill her obligation through her husband's lighting. That's what it says. See below note 2. We're going to get to that if we have time. And above, see chapter 11, note 14. But in essence, at its very essence, women are obligated to light the candles. For example, my family, my wife, at some years, she didn't light the candles. She was fulfill her obligation with mine. In other years, she decided to go back to her custom, which she grew up with, which she's Ashkenazi, right, Ashkenazi. We're going to get into that in a minute. There's a small difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and she lights her own Chanukah, and I mentioned that to you the other day, and we actually utilize that to light the Chanukah in different places. And so we have the lights here and lights there, and it's there's benefit to it. But some poskim encourage that women, even married women, should light the. But it's clear if a woman's not married, she's an obligation, unless she's going to be fulfilling her obligation with her father. If she doesn't have a home and she's dependent on her father, then her father or her mother can light for her. But if a woman is independent and living on her own, and so she has an obligation, like Hanukkah candles, no question about it. As a matter of fact, many times what the poskim say is that if you are traveling, you're on an airplane. I have a friend who's coming over from Australia. If they don't close the airports, they won't be able to light candles on an airplane. It's illegal. They'll it's dangerous. So the best thing to do is if they're married, tell your wife. The husband can tell the wife, or the wife can tell the husband. Either one, whoever's home, in their home, they light on behalf of their husband, and they can help them, assist them fulfill the obligation. Because women are obligated, and therefore they can assist their husbands fulfill their obligation when they're obligated.
When women have no kids, are they obligated to all the mitzvah?
They are, of course, obligated to. Yeah. So no, you're asking based on your original question about women's obligations. So we're not going to talk about it in detail. But the answer is no. But yes.
So you said that it is a mitzvah to eat dairy on Hanukkah because a Yehudit gave salty cheese to and who was the general?
A Greek general.
A Greek general, and he got very thirsty, and then he drank a lot of wine to quench his thirst. He fell asleep, and she was able to behead him.
Correct.
Two questions. If one is traveling, so we're taking our trip Tuesday, whatever it is, our upcoming trip. Are we better off turning to a friend and saying, look, light my candles, they'll be outside my house ready to go, and Yotzi me, are we better off doing that, or are we better off taking it with us and lighting someplace that we're staying one night but isn't really our home?
It's a good question. Question is, how do you define the home? If we have time tomorrow, maybe we'll get to it inside. The bottom line is most poskim say, and most people prefer to light the candles themselves. And as long as you're sleeping over the night at that place, it can be considered your home. And because you want to do the mitzvah yourself, not give it to someone else. But only if you don't have that option. But you're right, technically it is feasible. You could say, I want the candles to be lit in my home, ask someone to come over, light the candles for you in your home, and he'll be fulfilling the obligation for you in that way. And you don't have to light at your hotel.
Okay, then the second part of my question is, you were saying how it's a mitzvah to eat dairy. Therefore, would there be an extra bracha, an extra word, an extra something said to acknowledge it? Because usually when we do a mitzvah, we give thanks.
So that's why I think I slipped it in maybe a little too quickly, that it's not quite a mitzvah, like an obligation to eat dairy, like it's a mitzvah to light the candles, that's an obligation, there's a bracha. It's a custom, almost on the level of the sufganiyot, just a little bit more than the sufganiyot.
So it's not a mitzvah?
A mitzvah means a good thing to do. A mitzvah also means a commandment. So it depends what context you're using it. In this context, I should be more precise and say that it's a good custom, an ancient custom, to eat dairy, but not an obligation. If you want to have meat and wine every day, go for it. You don't have to have dairy at all but it's a custom that we do try to keep our customs, but it's not on the level of an obligation.
Should we try to have a sip of wine every day of Hanukkah then, too?
That's usually said on the holidays. It's usually on the holidays. Wine was not considered to be part of the commemoration.
In the negative, is that also
Yes.
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 We can use the concept of tikkun to make a house, to light the Hanukkah candle.
I don't think so.
Like I have like enough food for a meal.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think so. No. Okay, let's keep going.
No,
By the way, some people actually say that if you go to a hotel, I mentioned the other day, we're going to a hotel. If you're in a hotel room, most hotels do not allow you to light candles in your hotel room. It's dangerous.
What about Airbnb?
Also, Ron,
Question about hotels here in Israel.
Therefore,
Will they have a set area where you can light?
so what
candles?
many hotels here in Israel, they'll set an area in the lobby, in the dining room, for you to light the candles. The only problem is, it's not really your home. That's not where you're sleeping. And how does that have anything to do with like your door? How it doesn't show that you're lighting the candles? That's a public area. Some people say, well, since you're paying rent for the hotel in general, so you have a certain portion of the dining room, just like you have a certain portion of one room. It's not ideal. The better solution is if your wife is home, have her light on your behalf. And that's better than lighting in the dining room, in my opinion. But there's debatable. Some rabbis will say, but you should do the mitzvah yourself. Everything done by yourself shows that you care about it. And so, okay, light in the dining room without a bracha. Make sure that you tell your wife to light in your home for you with her bracha. She'll be yotze you. But anyways, this is halacha l'maaseh. It does, women are obligated and therefore they can assist you if needed to fulfill the mitzvah. Yes, Malti?
Can you light on the tent or sukkah?
It's a good question. How do you define a home when it comes to the mitzvah of
Well,
Chanukah?
even it's a negative.
Usually we say where you sleep tonight.
So the Mona Yeshiva
Tent
has
doesn't have a
food
door.
will
I don't
So
know.
how are you lighting on the teal then?
Because you're gonna have a room. You're gonna have a room. You're not going in the desert in tents. You're gonna have a room which is yours. On the doorway to the room, you're gonna light Chanukah candles. Or on the table in your room, as we talked about before, or in the window of the room, as we talked about before. All those are kosher places. But you have your own room for tomorrow night.
If a hotel or another place forbids lighting, not because of safety concerns, but because they don't want Jewish things
Do it in your
It's
room.
anti-Semitic.
Burn down the hotel.
At that point, we stand up.
Ozzy, why are you supporting that hotel?
Yeah, why are you in that hotel?
Well, I had a thing when I was younger, there was a boarding school I was at, that to quote the headmaster of the school, I was, quote, participating in group psychosis. I live anyway. I attended that school for a couple days after that.
Wow, wow.
But was I right to have done that, or should I have honored the school's request and said, look, if I understand that you viewed as group psychosis and therefore I don't like?
Well, I'm not going to talk about you and your situation. We have to hear more details. But definitely, if someone's trying to stop the Jews from keeping the mitzvot,
Decapitate
we
them.
should protest. I don't think we're not in the age of taking out swords and decapitating people. But by all means, if everybody else has religious rights, we should have religious rights, and we should be allowed to. It's not just a question of safety; it's something else. But so it sounds like you stood up for your rights, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. But I guess the details I don't know.
Can I say an anecdotal story?
Please.
So to David's point, there was once an apartment complex in the U.S. There was a situation where the tenant wanted to light Hanukkah candles, and the owner of the apartment did not. It went to court, and the judge said, "Well, you cannot light Hanukkah candles, but I'll give you 8 days to comply."
There's a similar story about he builds the sukkah on the roof, and the owner says in the court, says, "I don't want this." The judge, who was Jewish, winks at the defendant and says, "I'll give you 8 days to take it down."
Nice. Right? Good. Okay, so we're publicizing the miracle, we're lighting candles. Other questions?
Even if I don't fulfill the mitzvah itself, like if I'm not at home, if I do, it's right thing, right?
Yeah, the question is if you say a bracha, right? You can only say a bracha if it's a halachically valid lighting. It has to be in your home or the like. Yeah, like we mentioned the other day, that people put all sorts of candles on their cars and in public squares, and they're all good things, not necessarily fulfilling the original mitzvah with a bracha. But it's good to publicize the miracle. It's amazing that we publicize the miracle. We mentioned that there's a mitzvah to light Chanukah candles in the Beit Knesset. Here in the yeshiva, the Beit Midrash, we light Chanukah candles. It's nobody's home. It's not the doorway. It's not the window. But we publicize the miracle. It's an ancient custom. It appears in the Sefer Hamanig first time about 800 years ago. It's not from the Talmud. It's not an but the custom is to light in those places even with a bracha. And so there's a lot to rely on when it comes to the Chabadnikim trying to publicize the miracle everywhere they can. We have to stop here because we ran out of time. This is fun. Chanukah Sameach. I'm glad it was fun. Hanukkah is supposed to be fun. We'll continue study some more of the laws. And of course, you can give me all the rejects, all your complaints about what went wrong tonight, and we'll try to solve them for you tomorrow, same time, same place.
Can we text you right before ski?